The box showed up on a Thursday morning, plain brown cardboard, no return address, just their names written in handwriting they'd know anywhere. Inside was proof of what their absence at my wedding had set in motion. Before the sun went down, my phone started lighting up. 35 missed calls. They kept trying to reach me for 3 straight days. By day 3, I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean with my husband, and when I finally listened to those voicemails, I could hear the exact second they understood what their choices had actually cost them. To understand why that package made them spiral into complete panic, you need to know what kind of parents Grace and Robert Anderson really were. They were the kind who ask you to put your entire life on hold to protect your sister's feelings, then couldn't even keep their word when you finally stopped waiting. Growing up with Emily meant learning to read the weather before the storm hit. She was 3 years older, and from the time we were kids, her anger was impossible to ignore. Mom and Dad called it passion, but it wasn't. They egged her on and taught me to be the calm one, the one who understood that keeping the peace meant making myself smaller. I met Mike 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He wasn't flashy or loud. We started talking about our interests, and by the end of the night, I didn't want to leave. Our relationship instantly took off. A year ago, Mike and I were ready. He'd been hinting at engagement for months, looking at rings, talking about our future. But Emily was still with Nathan then, and they seemed solid. 5 years together, everyone expecting a proposal any day. I didn't want to step on that. Didn't want to make family dinners awkward or steal any thunder that might be coming Emily's way. So I asked Mike to wait. Just a little longer. He looked at me with those patient eyes and said he'd wait forever if that's what I needed. That's who Mike was. This year, we decided it was time. I wasn't going to wait indefinitely for a moment that might never come. I told Emily first, before anyone else, sitting in her apartment with coffee between us. I kept it quiet, private, no big announcement. She smiled and hugged me, said she was happy for me. I believed her. 3 days later, my phone rang at midnight. It was Mom. Emily's relationship with Nathan had imploded. She didn't give me details, just said Emily was devastated and coming home. My stomach dropped. The timing felt cruel, like the universe was playing some sick joke. My engagement, the one I'd already delayed once, now looked like salt in an open wound. When Emily came home, her eyes were red and hollow. She barely looked at me. I tried to talk to her, to say I was sorry about Nathan, that I was here if she needed anything. She just nodded and disappeared into her old bedroom. And I stood there, engagement ring feeling suddenly heavy on my finger, wondering if my happiness had somehow caused her pain. 2 weeks after Emily came home, my parents asked me to come over for coffee. I knew before I sat down what this was about. Mom's hands were folded on the table. Dad looked uncomfortable. Emily's not in a good place, Mom started gently. We think it would be kinder if you waited. Just until she's more stable. How long? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Maybe a year. Possibly 2. The words hung there. I'd already waited a year for Emily once before. Now, they wanted 2 more. I looked at their faces, concerned, hopeful that I'd understand. And I did understand Emily's pain. Breakups are brutal. But somewhere inside me, a quiet voice asked, is this pattern ever going to end? I'll give her a month, I said finally. Time to process. But then I'm moving forward. Mom's face fell. Dad shifted in his seat. We'll still come, Mom said quickly. Of course we'll be there. I nodded, wanting to believe her. 1 month later, I was ready to move ahead with the wedding. I reached out to Emily out of respect, tried to include her in planning, asked if she wanted to help choose flowers. She responded with one-word texts, cold but not hostile. When I asked directly if she'd come, she said yes. My parents said yes. I held on to those promises like lifelines. The morning of my wedding, I woke up calm. I'd done everything right, given Emily space, kept my parents informed, extended every olive branch I could reach. My dress hung on the closet door, ivory lace catching the early light. Hair and makeup took 2 hours, my bridesmaids laughing and sipping mimosas around me. Everything was perfect. I checked my phone. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from Emily. Maybe they were running late. Maybe they'd text from the road. I told myself not to worry, that they'd promised, that people don't just break promises like that. I slipped into my dress, my best friend zipping up the back, telling me I looked beautiful. I felt beautiful. I felt ready. The venue coordinator knocked. 15 minutes to processional. I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No texts. No on our way, or traffic is terrible, or even sorry, can't make it. Just nothing. Silence that grew louder with every passing minute. My bridesmaids exchanged glances. One of them gently asked if I wanted her to call my parents. I shook my head. If they wanted to be here, they would be here. I walked to the entrance of the ceremony space and looked through the doorway. Rows of white chairs, flowers on every surface, guests settling into their seats. And in the front row, on the left side, the side reserved for the bride's family, 2 empty chairs. Glaringly, impossibly empty. No last-minute rush through the doors. No apologies whispered in my ear. Just absence where presence had been promised. I felt it settle over me then, heavy and cold. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't traffic or a forgotten alarm. This was a choice. They'd chosen Emily's comfort over my wedding day. They'd chosen not to show up. But I didn't cry. Didn't panic. Didn't send desperate texts begging them to come. I'd spent my whole life accommodating, understanding, waiting. I was done waiting. The weight in my chest wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. I straightened my veil, lifted my chin. Those empty chairs weren't proof that I wasn't worth showing up for. They were proof that my parents had failed a test they didn't even know they were taking. The ceremony would go on. I would walk down that aisle. And they would have to live with what they'd chosen. I was standing near the entrance, trying to compose myself, when I saw them. Nathan and his father George, walking toward me in suits, looking slightly uncertain but smiling. For a second, I couldn't process it. Nathan, Emily's ex. The breakup that had derailed everything. What were they doing here? George reached me first, pulling me into a warm hug. "Phoebe, congratulations," he said, his voice genuine and kind. George had always been that way, steady, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembered birthdays and asked how you were really doing. Nathan hung back, respectful. "We saw the invitation on Facebook," he explained quietly. "We wanted to celebrate with you. I hope that's okay." I must have looked confused because he continued. "I was hoping, maybe if Emily was here in a happy setting, we could talk. She blocked my number. Blocked me everywhere. I just wanted a chance to." He stopped, shook his head. "I'm sorry. This is your day. We didn't mean to complicate things." "No, it's fine. I managed. I'm glad you're here." And I was. But the contrast was almost painful. Here was Nathan, Emily's ex-boyfriend, showing up to celebrate me. Here was George, who had no obligation to be here at all, standing in my venue with genuine happiness on his face. And my own parents, my own family, had left 2 chairs empty in the front row. George must have seen something in my expression because he squeezed my hand gently. "Everything all right?" I wanted to say yes. Wanted to smile and pretend everything was perfect. But the weight of those empty chairs was pressing down on me, and George's kindness made it harder to hold it all in. "They didn't come," I said quietly. "My parents. Emily. None of them." George's face shifted, surprise, then something that looked like understanding. He didn't ask why. Didn't make excuses for them. He just nodded slowly, his hand still holding mine, and said, "Then they're missing something beautiful." Nathan and I stepped aside, away from the gathering guests. He looked uncomfortable, like he was about to break a confidence, but felt he had no choice. "There's something you should know," he said quietly, "about what actually happened between Emily and me." I braced myself, expecting to hear about his mistakes, the reasons Emily had been so devastated. But what came out was nothing like I'd imagined. "Emily told everyone I broke her heart," Nathan began, his voice steady but pained. "But that's not what happened. The truth is, she was difficult for a long time. Tantrums over small things. Accusing me of cheating when I worked late or went out with friends. disrespecting me in front of people, calling me names, then acting like it was a joke. My stomach tightened. This wasn't the story I'd been told. This meant my parents had been misled. When you got engaged, he continued, Emily changed. She wasn't sad for herself, she was angry. She demanded I propose immediately. Said if I really loved her, I'd have a ring by the end of the week. When I told her I wasn't ready, that I wanted us to work through some things first, she exploded. Nathan's jaw tightened at the memory. She screamed at me in a restaurant, called me worthless, said terrible things about my family, about my dad. I suggested we take a break, cool off for a few days. She stormed out and told everyone I'd abandoned her. She tried coming back a week later, he said. But I couldn't do it anymore. I asked her to leave. I was respectful, calm. But I was done. The pieces were falling into place now, sharp and painful. Emily hadn't been the victim. She'd been the problem. This meant my parents had chosen wrong. They'd chosen to protect Emily. And in doing so, they'd abandoned me. I'm so sorry, Nathan said softly. I thought you knew. I shook my head, the weight of it settling.
No.
I didn't know anything. The coordinator signaled it was time. The processional music would start any minute. I stood alone at the entrance, bouquet trembling slightly in my hands. No father to take my arm. No mother fussing with my veil one last time. Just me and those empty chairs waiting at the end of the aisle. George appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with his hands clasped, watching me with that gentle, knowing expression. Would you allow me? He asked finally, his voice soft. I turned to him, confused. To walk you down the aisle, he clarified. If you'd like. I know I'm not family, but… Yes. The word came out before I could think. Relief flooded through me, warm and unexpected. Yes, please. George smiled, offered his arm. There was no pity in his eyes, no awkwardness. Just genuine care from someone who'd chosen to show up. Not out of obligation or blood ties, but because he wanted to celebrate me. The music swelled. George tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow, and we started walking. The aisle stretched before us, white petals scattered across the floor, guests rising to their feet. And there, at the end, was Mike. His eyes locked on mine, filling with tears the moment he saw me. Not sadness, pure joy. The kind of look that says you're everything I've been waiting for. I felt George's steady presence beside me, his stride matching mine, his quiet dignity filling the space my parents had left empty. We passed the front row. I didn't look at those vacant chairs.
Didn't need to.
They'd already said everything. When we reached the altar, George placed my hand in Mike's, then kissed my cheek. Be happy, he whispered. The ceremony unfolded like a dream. Mike's vows made me cry. Promises of partnership, of showing up, of choosing me every single day. My vows came from somewhere deep, words I'd been holding on to through all the waiting, all the disappointment. When we kissed, the room erupted in applause. Afterward, as guests warmed us with congratulations, Nathan approached. He held a sealed envelope, my sister's name written across the front. For Emily, he said quietly. When you see her, if you see her. I took it carefully, understanding the weight of what he was entrusting me with. The truth, in his own words, that Emily had never let him speak.
Thank you, I said.
For coming. For everything. Mike pulled me close as we walked back down the aisle, married now, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. The empty seats faded into irrelevance. This was my family now, the ones who showed up. 3 days after the wedding, I sat at our dining table with the photographer's proof sheet spread before me. Mike was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something off-key and happy. I studied each image carefully, looking for the ones that told the truth. There, George and me, his arm linked with mine as we walked down the aisle. His expression proud, almost paternal. My face serene, composed, genuinely happy despite everything. There. The two of us at the altar, George's hand on my shoulder as he prepared to step back. Mike's hand reaching for mine. The front row visible in the background, Those two empty chairs impossible to miss.
There.
The ceremony in full swing, guests on their feet, joy radiating from every face. Beauty and celebration happening exactly as planned, just without the people who'd promised to be there. I ordered professional prints. 8x10s, glossy, impossible to ignore. When they arrived, I laid them carefully in a plain brown box. Then I added Nathan's sealed envelope, Emily's name still written across the front in his careful handwriting. The truth she'd never let him tell. I wrote a note. Nothing dramatic. No accusations or guilt trips. Just facts in my own handwriting. You asked me to wait. I gave you a month. You promised you'd come. These are the moments you chose to miss. Phoebe. I addressed the box to my parents' house. No return address. No phone number. Just their names and the proof of everything they'd sacrificed for a daughter who'd been lying to them all along. Mike found me sealing the package. You sure about this? He asked gently. I nodded. I wasn't doing this out of spite or revenge. I was doing it because they needed to see what their choices looked like. They needed to know who'd actually shown up. If you were in my shoes, would you have sent the box? Or let them live without knowing the truth? I'd love to hear what you do. Comment below. We dropped the box at the post office on our way to the airport. By the time it arrived at their house on Thursday morning, Mike and I would be somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, honeymoon-bound for Hawaii. Unreachable. Untouchable. I imagined them opening it, seeing George where my father should have been, reading Nathan's letter and realizing Emily had manipulated them, understanding finally what their favoritism had cost. The plane lifted off and I turned off my phone. Whatever happened next, I'd be on a beach with my husband, finally free. I didn't see any of it happen, but my cousin Jody was there. She'd stopped by my parents' house Thursday morning to drop off some mail that had been delivered to her place by mistake. She told me everything later, her voice still shaken. The box arrived around 10. Mom and Dad opened it together at the kitchen table. Jody said the room went silent the moment they saw the first photo. Me in my wedding dress. George's arm linked with mine. The aisle stretching before us. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad just stared, his face draining of color. They shuffled through the other photos. George at the altar, the ceremony in full swing, those empty front row chairs visible in every shot. Grace started crying. Jody told me. Just these quiet, awful tears. Then Mom saw the envelope. Emily's name across the front in Nathan's handwriting. She opened it. Jody said she shouldn't have, but maternal instinct took over. The letter was 2 pages. Calm, detailed, respectful. Nathan's account of everything. Emily's tantrums, her accusations, her explosion when he wouldn't propose on demand. His attempts at reconciliation. His boundary when she tried to return. The truth, finally spoken. Mom read it aloud. Dad's face went from confusion to horror to something Jody described as complete devastation. Emily had lied. Emily had been abusive. Emily had destroyed her own relationship. And they'd missed my wedding, broken their promise, abandoned their younger daughter, to protect the one who'd manipulated them. Dad grabbed his phone first. Straight to voicemail. Mom tried next. Voicemail again. By sunset, Jody said they'd called 35 times. Each voicemail more frantic than the last. Apologies, justifications, desperate pleas for me to pick up. But I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, phone off, hand in Mike's, finally unreachable. The panic I'd lived with my entire life, always worried about upsetting Emily, always trying to keep peace, had finally transferred to where it belonged. Jody had a lot more to tell me. You need to know what happened after you sent that box, she said. Mom had confronted Emily that same afternoon, brought her into the living room, handed her Nathan's letter, demanded an explanation. Emily read it, her face hardening with each line. Is this true? Mom asked, her voice shaking. Emily's response was immediate and explosive. Mind your own business. No remorse. No explanation. Just fury that her narrative had been challenged. Dad tried to mediate, asking Emily to just talk to them, to help them understand. Emily turned on him too. Called them controlling. said they had no right to judge her relationship. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. Mom and Dad were left standing in the wreckage of their assumptions. They'd sacrificed the wrong daughter, protected the one who'd been lying, missed the wedding of the one who'd only ever asked to be seen. Jody said the whispers started within days. Relatives who'd been at my wedding began sharing what happened: the empty chairs, George stepping in, my parents' absence. Friends asked questions. The truth spread quietly but thoroughly. My parents' favoritism, their poor judgment, their failure to show up, it all became known. They became isolated in their own regret. Meanwhile, Mike and I were in Hawaii. Our honeymoon suite overlooked the ocean, waves crashing endlessly against black, volcanic rock. We spent days hiking, swimming, eating fresh pineapple on the balcony at sunset. My phone stayed on silent in the hotel safe. Day 3, curiosity finally got to me. I retrieved it, powered it on. 35 missed calls. 23 voicemails. I listened to them once, sitting on the edge of the bed while Mike rubbed my shoulders. Mom's voice progressed from panicked to desperate to angry to pleading. Dad's remained steady but broken. They apologized, explained, tried to gaslight. "We tried so hard to reach you." Justified. "We thought we were doing right by Emily." The final message was Mom crying, "Please, Phoebe, please just call us back. We need to talk to you. We need to fix this." I deleted them all, turned the phone off, looked up at Mike. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. I was more than okay. I'd spent my entire life trying to fix things, to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable. I was done. They'd made their choice. Now they could live with it. I returned to the beach with my husband, my peace intact, and never looked back. We came home tanned and rested, our apartment filled with Hawaiian coffee and shell necklaces we'd bought from a market vendor. The missed calls continued, emails now, long letters arriving in our mailbox, even a visit to my old apartment where the landlord told them I'd moved. I didn't respond to any of it. Not out of anger or spite. I was just done. Jody kept me updated on the family implosion. Emily never apologized, never admitted fault. My parents drowned in regret they couldn't undo. Relatives who'd witnessed everything began distancing themselves, uncomfortable with the favoritism they could no longer unsee. Mike and I built our life. New apartment with big windows and a kitchen we actually cooked in. Both our careers took off, promotions, new projects, the kind of momentum that comes when you're not carrying other people's dysfunction. We made friends who celebrated us without condition, who showed up because they wanted to, not because they were obligated. One evening, a thick envelope arrived. Formal stationery, my mother's careful handwriting. Inside was a 3-page letter. Apologies, explanations, claims that they'd always loved me but had wanted to support Emily through her crisis. They hoped I could understand, could forgive, could let them back in. I read it once, filed it in a drawer. No response needed. That night, Mike and I cooked pasta together, laughing about the time we'd gotten lost hiking and ended up at a waterfall we hadn't planned to find. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom again. I glanced at it, silenced it, returned to stirring marinara sauce. "You okay?" Mike asked. "I'm perfect," I said. And I meant it. I'd learned the hardest lesson. Some people will always choose the squeaky wheel, will always prioritize the loudest pain. But I didn't have to participate in that system anymore. Those empty chairs at my wedding weren't an ending. They were permission to start fresh. And I did. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If any part of it felt familiar, you're not alone. If you'd like to hear more real family stories like this one, you can subscribe to the channel. And if this story brought up something personal for you, feel free to share it in the comments. I do read them. Thanks for listening.